Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation.
So we've been talking about environment and where you live matters and the importance of environment in reaching your goals. But did you know that 92% of goals we fail at? Isn't that wild?
Hey, we're all in this together, huh? It's not just me or you or someone else who's doesn't have a whole lot of success with this. That's an incredible number. It almost makes you say, why bother,
Yeah.
We've all seen it when you go, you've done it yourself, or you've seen people who, I'm going to go to the gym after the new year. I'm going to lose 25 pounds. I'm going to eat lettuce every single day and become a vegan. And then after 2 weeks, they kind of flatline. So number one, Teresa, why do they do this and why do they fail?
Gosh, it's good to set big goals. Sounds like those folks have set big goals, and that's a good thing. My coach always says relying just on willpower is like holding your breath underwater.
Wow.
You can do it for a little bit, but at some point you've got to come up for air. And the question is why? And I think while it's good to have big goals, it's better to have little strategies.
Sort of like eating an elephant type of thing,
Uh-huh.
How do you eat an elephant? One little bite at a time? That's what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you're going to climb a roof with a ladder, you can only go one step at a time. If you try something else, you're probably going to have some drama. And I recall Dr. Moore wrote a book. He's from Stanford, and I believe, and he wrote a book, One Small Step Can Change Your Life. And he talks about, doing it in steps. In fact, he went all around the world to find out where they're successful at this. And he found they have a whole lot more success in Japan, with something they call Kaizen. You know that, Teresa, right? Don't you use that in your coaching?
Absolutely. Small steps. In fact, the smallest step is the best step, right?
Yeah, I think that's what you ask yourself. Okay, I want to lose 50 pounds. Let's just say that. Okay. What is the smallest step I can take towards that goal? And whatever that is, that becomes your goal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But why? I think maybe more important though, why? What's your why? What's your big why? That big why that's more important than anything. Why do you want to lose 50 pounds? So clearing that up, because when your primitive brain just wants to eat the Snickers bar, the only thing that's going to get you through that is your why. So what's the why of losing 50 pounds? First, but then the how, that's the small steps.
If we are faced with large change, whether it's externally, like someone says, you have to do something that's almost impossible, or worse, it's self-induced. We say we have to do something that's huge, that the brain responds in such a way that we're doomed to fail. And yet when we take small steps, the brain acts differently, and therefore it doesn't become a barrier to success. It becomes a help to success, doing a small step.
So we're kind of our own worst enemies, because on the one hand, we take on too much of a challenge because we try to see the end goal instead of the steps in between. And then we also have this fear of failing and looking like a failure, so we put so much pressure on ourselves to succeed. So you're saying by this Kaizen, it's like baby steps. So Kaizen is just small incremental steps toward your goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's about there's the brain physiology that Dr. Moore talks about in his book, but I think it's also about building confidence and competence that you can indeed change. And when, if you fail all the time, you're not going to be very optimistic about any change that you might want to bring into your life. Well, I failed before. So even if you don't admit it, underlying in your core, you say, I don't do so well at this. But if you do small steps, what's the smallest step? I had a patient, by the way, who needed to change because he was definitely going to have a heart attack, and overweight, hypertensive, pre-diabetic, all of that. And so I asked him after reading Dr. Mora's book and writing mine, together, let's decide what's the smallest thing you can do to work towards addressing all of these issues that are going to result in a heart attack for you. And so physically he was sedentary. So the first thing we both decided on is how about if I stand up? His name was Tony. Tony says, how about if I just stand up during TV commercials? And that's what he did. And he was able to do that. And then when he was doing that regularly, then he went to the next small step. And it took a while, but he got there.
So I know in my own life and people that I know, we're big on the timeline. And I still have a paper blotter. I know people use, Google Calendar. And if I have a project that's going to take a few months, and my goal is whether it's to write a book or an article or something, if I look at the entire project, that inspires fear. I can see my amygdala going, wah! So for me, I'll actually plot out, I'm going to do this on Monday, Tuesday, and I'll plot out everything till I reach that end goal, however long it is. And then I refuse to look at the rest of the week. I'm on Monday, and I'm only going to look on Monday with a little fluidity. So if Monday I don't get it all done, then I know, okay, I've got to be flexible with this deadline and move things out a little bit. Would that be kind of an example of a Kaizen approach?
I think it's a great example, Danielle, because we have a big goal and we have small steps, and your expectations of yourself are small for the day, right? And you, at any point, you can stop and look back and see how much you've accomplished. And also that big goal is going to draw you forward into the future. So even if you want to do something else in that moment, that big goal will keep you dedicated to the task of the day. I think that's a great example.
Yeah, and I guess the big thing is not to beat yourself up. Like if I get to the end of the day, and other people have countered this and say, okay, I only got 80%, not 100%, not to have that self-talk saying, oh man, I failed. It's like I succeeded at 80%, and obviously I overplanned.
That's very destructive if you do take that personally and basically feel that you failed. You may brush it off this time, brush it off that time, but ultimately it begins to become part of who you see yourself as when it comes to change, someone who fails most of the time. And that is probably the biggest barrier to being successful to change, that you don't believe, you don't have the competence and competence. And that's why the small steps are so valuable. It's not because you can achieve them, not just because you can achieve them probably a lot more easily. It's because each time you succeed, you feel more and more empowered. And Tony started to take bigger steps later on because he was very confident that he could do it, where before he wasn't. So that's an important part, how you look at the process that you lay out. So wasn't it Thomas Edison? There's a new movie out about Edison, but I think it was 10,000 times he tried to invent the electric light bulb, and he failed 10,000. That's what someone said. So how's it you failed 10,000 times? He goes, no. I learned 10,000 ways that didn't work, that led me to the way that it did work.
Yeah, failure is really information, right? If something ends up being a failure, that's really information. So failure isn't a person. Failure is a circumstance. It's a fact. It's feedback. It's information. There is the thinking of fail forward. Fail as much as you can fail, because that's information that will eventually get you to where you're going. The more you fail, the better. So, and that sounds scary, but failure is such a kind of a bad word in our culture, but maybe think about it that way. It's interesting. So Kaizen is either about failure, standing on a pile of failure and achieving your goal, or I guess you could also look at it as, building a series of small successes toward your goal, whichever one works for your mindset.
Lifestyle change is tough, and in an environment, again, where we only value in our culture the big braggable change, where you walk into a bar and said you ran 100 miles, last week, and anything short of that is you're not going to brag about it. You ain't going to walk into a bar and say, hey, I took 10 more steps yesterday than the day before. Nothing, and in that culture, it's very, very difficult. So I don't, this is simple to us and it's simple in theory, but this is a very difficult thing. It requires discipline and I believe a confidence in yourself that will gradually grow stronger and stronger. And the unwillingness to beat yourself up.
That's right. Oh, there it is. We're so hard on ourselves, right? And it's that also it's often that the internal dialogue that flies under the radar. We don't even hear it, but it affects us. That beating ourselves up.
We're not patient. Tony took a year to get where he wanted to go. And we tend not to be that patient, but the way you get change, Dr. Morris says, and I've seen in my practice, that's durable. A lot of times we make changes. Okay, I want to lose weight. I only eat broccoli. I can't live just on broccoli. Yeah, I'll lose some weight, but that's not going to be sustainable and durable. When you do change this way in small steps, developing confidence and competence and inching your way, or maybe more than inching, but in steps towards where you ultimately want to be, that's durable change because that becomes a lifestyle for you.
Absolutely. So we have big goals, but we should also Kaizen our expectations, right? We're not going to lose 20 pounds by next week. Maybe that was what was really in Tony's corner, is he didn't have high expectations. He knew it was going to be a slow process over a period of time toward a worthy goal.
That's probably the best message I was able to get through to him, because he did most of it on his own after a few times together, and then he got it, and he would come to me with what his next step was, and I would just occasionally I said, "Whoa, Tony, really? That's a lot," and we talk about it. But for the most part, he did it on his own after that first part. It was something beautiful for me to see, and to see him just blossom into someone who was confident that he could do this. He got off all of his meds. He's no longer pre-diabetic. He has a lifestyle of more activity, and he's looking good. People are telling him he's looking good, so he's getting all these positive incentives. So, it's just a momentum that grows. Instead of circling the drain, you're going the other way.
That's right. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." And I think that's a great example.
Well, this is much more, I was optimistic because everybody failed. Now I'm optimistic because we don't have to fail, and we can really do this. And so no matter what it is that someone has, we know we want to move more and learn more and be socially connected and have meaning and purpose. Some of us are a long way from being where we should be or want to be, but now we know a way to get there. I think this is from the Japanese, they do it for organizational change and for individual change, just small steps.
So know your why, have big goals, right? But Kaizen your strategy, Kaizen your expectations. Think about the smallest initial step you can take.
We hope this podcast is a source of inspiration. If you're ready to dive deeper into these concepts and really apply them in your life, join us over at Master Life. You'll have a personalized experience and lots of support to create your own long, bright future. mymasterlife.com